Welcome to Street Knowledge with Chris Graham.
Is Tony Elliott on the hot seat? Hey, Chris Graham here from Augusta Free Press. And the short answer is it's at least warm and maybe getting warmer. I think it's fair to speculate how the big season that a lot of folks seem to think is in store for Virginia Tech just down the road might factor into the thinking around Tony Elliott in Virginia. And I think, when you look around, I've been reading a lot about some buzz around Tech being a sleeper pick to contend in the ACC this year. Some analysts even suggesting Tech could sneak into the ACC championship game picture, and that means 9, 10 wins. I mean, that's, to get into the ACC championship game now, it's a one conference setup again, no divisions. Top two teams overall get into that championship game. So we're not talking about a coastal team getting in with a 7-5 or 8-4 record. So if Brent Pry in year three of his regime has Tech on the doorstep of an ACC title game, it's hard not to imagine the people who pay the bills at UVA saying, wait a second, our guy's in year three, and what are we getting for our dollars? The media vote in the preseason ACC football poll has Virginia preseason 16 in the 17 team league. I've seen projections from the computers, which and the Vegas people who they make money by using their computers to try to get you to bet one way or the other. 4 or 5 wins, 4.5 to 5 wins. I think the ESPN FPI had 4.6 wins. The Vegas number I saw was 5.1. So let's put it right there at the five mark. Um, I'm pretty much the only media type out there who thinks that a bowl is possible this year. A bowl is just 6 wins. So not much more than what the computers seem to be projecting. But even simple bowl eligibility would pale in comparison to 9 or 10 wins in Tech in their year three with their new coach. Elliott's in year three at Virginia. If Tech down there is competing for a chance to play either Clemson or Florida State, most likely, maybe Miami, who knows, in an ACC championship game, and that would then say, hey, you win that game, you're in the playoff, right? Um, 6-6 isn't quite the same as that. And then that's if things go well. I mean, the schedule is nice at the beginning of the season for Virginia, and then the second half really starting with game six, and then the second half is just it's not easy. It's not gonna be good. Um, I've written about how the schedule sets up that I mean Virginia could be 4-0, maybe even 5-0. And that's like stretching it. I understand, but there's five winnable games, very winnable games at the start of the season. What if they don't go 5-0 or 4-1? What if that, the winnable stretch of games ends with a 2-3 record? What happens then? Um, that those last seven games that Virginia could and I think likely will be an underdog in all seven of those games, at least where we're sitting right now. And that's even, I think, even with a 5-0 start, they're still underdog in those last seven games against that schedule. Um, if you're 2-3, even 3-2, you could be looking at a 2 or 3 win season here. The one thing I've been running consistently is that Virginia is not the kind of school that cuts bait with a coach after year three. Um, but the word we got here at AFP over the weekend is that there's rumbling among the donors, and it's a lot about the 55-17 loss to Tech to end last season. Virginia was competitive, 3-9 record, but competitive. There were games blown. I attribute at least three losses to special teams miscues, three one-score games that two had blocked punts returned for touchdowns. One had a penalty on a missed field goal at the end of regulation that set up a chip shot field goal that NC State made. If you win a couple of those games, you're on the threshold of a bowl last year. But instead, they weren't, and then they got blown out. That 55-17 was not indicative of how much of a thorough beatdown. And that's a 38-point win, but Tech, oh my God, that game was not close from the start. Um, so what we're hearing is that the magic number's five. That's what the computers seem to think is possible. I mean, a 4.6 to 5.1 in the computers, right? And I'm just going to quibble on that. 5 wins is still not bowl eligibility. And if Tech down the road is 9 wins, 10 wins, I don't know that even five does it. I think getting into a cold weather bowl And that's only 6 wins, but I think, getting to 6 wins is going to be essential for Tony Elliott and his staff. Um, and I think a big part of that is not just what Tech's doing down the road, but that $80 million football ops center that opened earlier, I guess right before the summer in June. The money that is being put into this program is demanding wins. The people who put the $80 million together to build that facility didn't write big checks to see Virginia not win games. The kind of people who write big checks are not the kind of people who have access to money because they make bad decisions with their money. They're not paying for Virginia to have great academic facilities for its football team. They're paying for that to be a selling point to get a better football team. We all know money drives the decisions. The biggest issue for UVA athletics is 20,000 empty seats every Saturday. I guess there's at least a Friday game this year too. So every Friday or Saturday. The bottom line impact on that is obvious. Virginia makes about $7.5 million less in ticket sales for football per year compared to Virginia Tech. That number is probably going to be a bigger discrepancy this year with Tech expected to be a ACC contender. So, I mean, that's $7 or $8 million at least, maybe more this year. When, as we reported last week, Tony Bennett, basketball coach, was told he's not going to be able to fill a couple of open staff positions because of budget cuts. That's where this comes down to. It's not just for football; it's for everything across the board. Tony Elliott is still undecided at quarterback, and no, this is not good news. Chris Graham here, talking UVA football. Going into training camp, the word around the UVA football program was that Tony Muskett was the clear number one at quarterback, the fifth-year senior. But now the word, and this is coming straight from Tony Elliott himself, is that he still has not decided on who his quarterback's going to be between Tony Muskett and Anthony Colandrea. And this is not good. On whatever reason you may have for not naming a quarterback, it's not good. Here's the quote from Elliott after practice on Monday. I'm hopeful that as we get through this week, in fairness to whoever it is, at least we have a week to prep as a starter. But we're going to have some tough conversations with all of our personnel over the next couple of days. So the training camp ended. Now Virginia is into game week phase, even though the opener is August 31st. We're still 10 days away, a little bit of extra time to, get the game plan together, et cetera, et cetera. So it's down to Muskett, who was the starter at the beginning of the season last year, started 6 games. He was in and out of the lineup with injuries. Anthony Colandrea, who has a true freshman, stepped in and started 6 games. Pretty much similar numbers. Uh, Similar passer ratings, completion percentages, touchdown and interception ratios. They're in a lot of ways the same guy. The Ideally to me, Muskett's the guy. Just from a succession standpoint, Muskett's a fifth-year senior. He's done with college after this year. Calandre is a sophomore, has 3 years of eligibility, whether he uses one of those years this year, and then, junior and senior year the next 2 years, or if he redshirts this year, he still has 3 years left after this year. Um, to me, the worst case scenario here is they both shuttle in and out of the starting lineup. There's no continuity of the offense, and Muskett doesn't shine enough to keep Calandre from burning the red shirt. And so you waste a year of his eligibility to get half a guy. The hard thing to tell here is the fact that there's no decision made because neither has distinguished himself, and the choice comes down to the lesser of two evils, or is it just that they're both playing so good that you can't go wrong either way? I don't think it's the latter, unfortunately. Um, so going into the camp again, Muskett was the guy we were told was the guy. Um, Elliott, I mean, so I said worst case scenario, even worse, he's suggesting he might play both. In fact, a question was asked of him at the press gaggle after practice on Monday if he was going to do a two QB, system, and he said he might. And the old saying in football is if you have two quarterbacks, you don't really have one. I hate to say it, I'm the guy who's been positive about UVA football going into the season, but it's starting to feel to me already that things are going off the rail with the season. Alabama is paying its football general manager a lot of money, which leads to the question, does UVA football even have a general manager? Hey, Chris Graham here. So I saw a headline on ESPN.com earlier this week about Alabama giving its football general manager a record contract. And that made me think, I don't know that UVA football has a general manager. I don't have to ask about this. So I did what I do. I sent a note to the folks in media relations and got the answer back. Quick answer. No, we don't have a general manager for the football program. So let me tell you what the issue there might be then. A guy named Courtney Morgan is the general manager for Alabama football. And the record contract that was referenced in that ESPN story is $825,000 a year for the next 3 years. The background on Morgan is he followed Kalen DeBoer. I'm not sure how to pronounce that name. He's the new Alabama coach, and I've not heard the name said out loud. He was the coach at Washington last year, was in the national championship game. I just didn't pay attention. DeBoer will go with the guy hired to replace Nick Saban. Not an easy job to have there. He brought Morgan with him to be his GM. He had him as his GM up at Washington for a couple of years. And this GM job, let's explain what that is. Football general manager to college level. What is it? It's a roll up of recruiting director, player personnel director, and budget director. Let's just, all three of those roles. He's being credited, Morgan is, with assembling in Alabama what is now the second ranked recruiting class for the 2025 recruiting cycle. And the work he's already done there has gotten him attention. USC, Southern Cal, came calling when Morgan was originally contracted to Alabama. He was making $500,000 a year. After Southern Cal made a run at him, Alabama upped his pay from $500,000 a year to $825,000 a year. For context on what that means, UVA's athletic director makes $1.09 million, so about $270,000 more. She runs the whole athletics program at UVA. She does all that work and budgets and all that stuff for 27 sports, not one. And so Alabama is playing pretty seriously here, right? Um, Now we need us a football general manager trend in the college game is still pretty new. But more schools are seeing the value of having one person overseeing the increasingly complicated player acquisition part of the business. It used to be, I was explaining to somebody today, back when George Welsh was coach, let's go back to just, to the good old days. Um, you had to recruit high schools. That's what you recruited. There was no transfer portal. There were guys transferring at the college level, but there was no portal. And you had a year to sit out. Transfers were just an afterthought. I mean, you might pick up a transfer here and there, but you weren't working the transfer route. You were focused. You had your player personnel director focused, your recruiting director focused right there on the high school game. You didn't have NIL. You didn't have to worry about budgets. And so you had a recruiting coordinator. He's probably also one of your assistant coaches, and all he did was he oversaw what the other assistant coaches did. Each assistant coach on the staff is assigned a region to be responsible for in recruiting, and the coordinator would just make sure everybody was doing their job, right? And he probably had his own area to cover as well. Well, in this day and age now, you've got high school recruiting, you've got the transfer portal, which is a 24/7, 365. Everybody's a free agent every year. Um, until the powers that be in the NCAA figure out a way to change that situation. It's pretty easy to do. Just require schools to or allow schools to sign guys to contracts, whether they be 1, 2, 3, or 4 years. Um, but all those pieces being disparate as they are, it's just wise to have someone in charge of making sure that there's cohesion to everything that you do there, right? And it's the model is the NFL general manager. In the NFL, the head coach isn't responsible for recruiting the players, signing the players, drafting the players. He's part of that process, but it's just a part. You've got other people doing, other parts of that job. College game is now evolving to that stage. More schools like Alabama are doing this. Texas Tech has a guy making 800,000 a year doing this job, and they're not the only other school doing it. So. People who read our coverage of UVA athletics often ask me to, identify areas where UVA athletics is coming up short. This is one of them. It's another area where UVA athletics is behind its peers.